Imagine a place where the sun feels less like a star and more like an apex predator. Welcome to the Mojave. It is a scorched wasteland where temperatures can easily melt the rubber right off your boots. Out here, the air itself tries to drain the precious moisture from your lungs. At first glance, it just looks like a massive dead zone, a harsh, silent expanse of cracked earth and jagged rocks where absolutely nothing could possibly survive. But that is exactly what the Mojave wants you to think. It is a master of deception. Just beneath the baking sand and hiding deep inside the razor-sharp brush, a hidden war is raging right now. Survival in this furnace is a brutal game of extreme engineering and endless patience. Every single day is a strict calculation of hydration and heat. You either find water or you perish. You find a shadow or you burn. And when the relentless sun finally drops below the horizon, the rules completely change. The desert floor cools down, and the pitch-black shadows come alive with an entirely different set of killers. This is definitely not a place for the weak or the slow. It is a ruthless masterpiece of adaptation, where every single drop of moisture is paid for in blood. Let's step into the heat and see who really rules this scorched kingdom. The transition from night to day in the Mojave is not a gentle, welcoming awakening. It is the ringing of a starting bell. The moment that first sliver of sunlight breaches the horizon, a countdown begins. The temperature starts its steady, merciless climb, and the inhabitants of the desert floor have only a few precious hours to get things done before the heat becomes lethal. Out in the sagebrush, a coyote is finishing up the night shift. He is a scruffy, lean ghost moving silently across the cracked dirt. Coyotes here are not like their fat, well-fed cousins in the northern forests or the suburbs. They are the ultimate opportunists, running on absolute minimal calories. He trots with purpose, his nose hovering just an inch above the ground, trying to catch the lingering scent of a jackrabbit, or perhaps the rotting remains of something that did not make it through the night. He knows the sun is his enemy right now. Every mile he covers costs water, and water out here is the rarest currency. The coyote will chew on prickly pear cactus pads if he has to, enduring the spines just to get a few mouthfuls of the moisture trapped inside. But soon, even the tough coyote knows he needs to find a deep patch of shade to wait out the inferno. As the coyote retreats, a much older, slower resident emerges from a burrow beneath a creosote bush. It is a desert tortoise, a creature that looks like it belongs to an entirely different geological era. They move with an agonizing, deliberate slowness, looking like walking stones. You might wonder how something this slow survives in a place this harsh. The answer is incredibly simple. They almost never come out. A desert tortoise spends about 95% of its life deep underground, where the temperature is stable and cool. They only surface during these narrow morning windows to gorge on spring wildflowers and dry grasses. But their real superpower is how they handle water. A tortoise carries its own internal canteen. They can store water in their bladders for over a year, drawing moisture from it when times are tough. If a predator startles them, they might pee out of fear, emptying that bladder. In the Mojave, that simple mistake is an absolute death sentence. Suddenly, a blur of feathers tears across the dirt path. A roadrunner. These birds are absolute maniacs. They do not have the luxury of hiding all day. They have a terrifyingly high metabolism to feed. Clocking speeds of up to 20 miles an hour, this strange, long-legged bird is hunting. The roadrunner stops dead in its tracks, its tail flicking up and down. Its eyes lock onto a patch of gravel. A small whiptail lizard is trying to blend in. It is a terrible mistake. In a flash, the bird strikes, snatching the lizard in its beak and violently thrashing it against a rock until it goes limp. The roadrunner swallows its meal whole. It gets all the water it needs right from the blood and tissue of its prey. As the morning sun finally turns brutal, the morning shift clocks out and the desert prepares to burn. Look past the flat, baked valleys, and you will see the jagged, towering mountain ranges that slice through the Mojave. These peaks look entirely dead from a distance, just massive piles of sun-scorched granite and crumbling limestone. But these unforgiving vertical walls are actually a heavily contested kingdom. Up here, where the wind howls and the rocks are sharp enough to slice open a rubber tire, the desert bighorn sheep reign supreme. These animals are a marvel of biological engineering. Watch them move along a cliff face that looks perfectly flat to the human eye. They do not walk, they calculate. They bound across seemingly impossible drops with the casual confidence of someone walking down a paved sidewalk. Their secret lies entirely in their hooves. The outer edge of a bighorn's hoof is hard and sharp, designed to catch on the tiniest micro-ledges of rock. But the center of the hoof is a soft, spongy pad that grips the smooth stone like climbing rubber. They can scale a sheer vertical drop to reach an isolated patch of bunchgrass or a hidden rock depression holding a few ounces of rainwater. But even at this altitude, they are not completely safe. There is a reason the bighorn sheep are constantly looking over their shoulders, their massive curled horns framing their incredibly sharp vision. They are looking for the ghost of the mountains, the mountain lion. A Mojave mountain lion is a completely different beast compared to those living in the dense green forests of the Pacific Northwest. Here, the cats are leaner, their coats a lighter, washed-out sandy color that perfectly mimics the dry rocks. They have massive territories, sometimes roaming over 100 square miles just to find enough food. The puma cannot outrun a bighorn sheep, not on this terrain. A chase would be a waste of precious energy and water, so the cat must play the ultimate game of patience. It will wait for hours, perfectly still, wedged between two boulders near a narrow mountain pass. The cat tracks the wind, knowing that a single shift in the breeze will carry its scent to the sheep and ruin a hunt that took 3 days to set up. When the strike happens, it is silent and incredibly violent. It is a burst of coiled muscle and sharp claws over the unforgiving rock. A misstep from either animal means a fatal plunge down the canyon. In this high-altitude arena, the margin for error is exactly 0. It is a brutal standoff where gravity is just as much a predator as the lion itself. Down in the lower elevations, where the wind kicks up blinding dust devils, the real masters of the Mojave do not run. They wait. As the midday sun turns the surface of the sand into a frying pan, reaching temperatures well over 140 degrees, the desert floor seems completely empty. But beneath the sparse shade of a low-hanging bush, danger is coiled up tight. Meet the Mojave green rattlesnake. It is arguably one of the most dangerous reptiles on the entire continent. Its scales are a dusty olive-green color that makes it practically invisible against the scrub. But what makes this snake truly terrifying is its chemistry. Most rattlesnakes rely on a hemotoxic venom, a thick cocktail that destroys tissue and blood cells, basically digesting their prey from the inside out. But the Mojave green has a horrifying upgrade. Its venom also contains a powerful neurotoxin. It does not just melt tissue, it aggressively shuts down the nervous system, paralyzing the lungs and the heart in minutes. This snake does not need to chase anything. It just needs one successful strike. The snake's primary target is a creature that seems entirely defenseless, but is actually a masterpiece of desert survival, the kangaroo rat. These tiny rodents are the heartbeat of the desert night. They look like a mix between a mouse and a miniature kangaroo, equipped with oversized hind legs and a long, tufted tail used for balance. A kangaroo rat can live its entire life without ever taking a single drink of liquid water, not one drop. Their kidneys are so insanely efficient that they extract every single molecule of moisture they need from the dry seeds they forage. But surviving the lack of water is only half the battle. They also have to survive the snakes. The snake relies on its heat-sensing pits to target the warm body of the rat in the dark. It strikes with a speed faster than the human eye can track. But the kangaroo rat has an answer. Its hearing is so incredibly tuned that it can actually hear the low-frequency sound of the snake's muscles contracting right before the strike. In a fraction of a millisecond, the rat kicks its powerful hind legs, launching itself up to 9 feet in the air, twisting its body mid-flight to avoid the fangs. Sometimes, they even use their strong legs to kick dirt right into the snake's face as they jump. It is a high-stakes, split-second dance between a lethal ambush predator and an acrobat that refuses to die. While the battle for survival rages in the dirt and the rocks, another completely different war is being fought high above it all. By midday, the Mojave turns into an absolute furnace. The ground heats the air, creating massive, invisible pillars of rising heat called thermals. And for the heavy hitters of the sky, these thermals are the perfect free ride. Soaring thousands of feet above the cracked earth is the golden eagle. With a wingspan that can reach over 7 feet, this massive raptor is the undisputed apex predator of the Mojave sky. Flapping wings at this temperature would burn too much energy, so the eagle simply locks its wings and rides the hot air currents in slow, massive circles. From this altitude, the eagle's vision is a terrifying weapon. It can spot the slight twitch of an ear from over a mile away. And down below, a black-tailed jackrabbit is trying very hard to stay completely still under the shade of a Joshua tree. The jackrabbit is another engineering marvel. Take a look at those ridiculously long ears. They are not just for hearing, they are the rabbit's air conditioning system. The ears are packed with a dense network of blood vessels. As a slight breeze blows across the thin skin, it cools the blood, which then circulates back through the rabbit's body, dropping its core temperature. But those giant ears also make it a highly visible target. The eagle spots the rabbit. It folds its massive wings and drops from the sky like a feathered missile, reaching speeds of over 150 miles an hour. The wind literally screams through its feathers. The jackrabbit hears the incoming death and bolts, hitting speeds of 40 miles an hour, zigzagging through the cactus to break the eagle's line of sight. It is a pure test of speed versus agility, and the loser becomes dinner. But eagles are not the only ones watching. Sitting on the decaying arms of a dead Joshua tree are the ravens. They are the ultimate opportunists, heavily armored in black feathers that should technically overheat them. But ravens are incredibly smart. They pant like dogs to cool down and know exactly how to play the system. They wait for an eagle to make a kill, or for a coyote to leave behind some scraps. They are the cunning observers, surviving the extreme heat not through brute force or incredible speed, but through raw, calculating intelligence. When the Mojave sun reaches its absolute peak, usually around 2 in the afternoon, the desert surface looks like a barren wasteland. It seems utterly lifeless. The silence is heavy, broken only by the dry, hot wind rustling through the dead brush. To be caught out here right now without shade is a rapid death sentence. But life in the Mojave hasn't vanished. It has simply changed floors. If you dig just 2 feet down into the hard, baked earth, a magical transformation happens. The temperature plummets by over 50 degrees. The humidity rises. Down here, in a vast, interconnected network of burrows, tunnels, and cracks, lies a bustling, hidden metropolis. Waiting in the cool darkness of these subterranean fortresses is the giant desert hairy scorpion. This is the largest scorpion in North America, stretching over 5 inches long. It is an ancient, heavily armored tank of a creature. It does not need to hunt during the day. It simply waits at the entrance of its burrow, its pedipalps, or claws, open and ready. Scorpions have a bizarre secret. If you shine an ultraviolet light into these dark holes, the scorpions glow a brilliant, toxic neon green. Scientists still debate why they do this, but one theory suggests their entire body acts as a giant eye, sensing UV light to determine if it is completely dark outside before they leave the safety of the burrow. Sharing this underground world, often uncomfortably close, is the desert tarantula. They are massive, hairy, and despite their terrifying appearance, incredibly fragile. A fall from just a few feet can shatter their abdomen like a dropped water balloon. The tarantula spends the blazing hours carefully maintaining its silk-lined tunnel, trapping precious moisture against the walls. Small lizards, desperate to escape the surface heat, will often dive into the first hole they find. It is a massive gamble. Sometimes they find an empty, cool tunnel and survive the afternoon. Other times they dive straight into the waiting jaws of a tarantula or the stinging tail of a scorpion. Down here in the dark, the brutal rules of the Mojave still apply. The sun may not burn you underground, but in the shadows, you are always on someone else's menu. As the sun finally dips below the jagged horizon, the Mojave breathes a massive sigh of relief. The lethal heat dissipates, bleeding out into the cold vacuum of space. The temperature can drop by 50 degrees in just a few hours. This is not the end of the day out here. For the vast majority of desert residents, it is the actual morning. The shadows stretch out, turning black, and the dry air begins to cool. This is when the night shift clocks in, and they are hungry. Up in the hollowed-out arms of an ancient Joshua tree, a pair of large, yellow eyes snap open. It is the western screech owl. This bird is practically invisible during the day, perfectly blending into the rough bark, but at night, it is a silent, ruthless assassin. It does not soar high like the eagles. Instead, it uses a technique of short, stealthy flights, moving from branch to branch, listening. Its facial disc acts like a radar dish, funneling the faintest sounds of scurrying feet right to its ears. The desert floor is suddenly alive. Millions of insects that spent the day buried in the sand are now emerging. Crickets, beetles, and massive moths take to the cool night air. The white-lined sphinx moth, a creature so large it is often mistaken for a hummingbird, hovers over the pale desert flowers that only bloom at night. These moths are vital pollinators, but tonight their frantic wing beats are drawing unwanted attention from above. A dark shape drops out of the sky. It is a pallid bat. Unlike most bats that catch insects mid-air, the pallid bat is a ground hunter. It swoops down, hovering just inches above the sand, listening for the heavy footsteps of a scorpion or a large moth. It hits the ground, snatching the giant moth in its jaws, and immediately takes off again. They are entirely immune to scorpion venom, casually eating the deadly arachnids like popcorn. But the bat needs to be careful. As it circles back toward its roost, a shadow detaches itself from the Joshua tree. The screech owl drops silently. Owl feathers have specialized fringed edges that muffle the sound of air rushing over them. It makes absolute zero noise. The bat never even hears the incoming strike. With a sharp snap of talons, the owl claims its midnight meal. The dark hours in the Mojave are not a time of rest. They are an aggressive, fast-paced scramble for calories before the sun returns to burn them all back into hiding. In a landscape defined by extreme thirst, water is the ultimate god. There are no massive lakes or rushing rivers here, just isolated, hidden springs and small rock depressions called tinajas that trap a few gallons of muddy rainwater. Finding these tiny blue dots in a vast ocean of brown is a matter of life and death, and everyone knows exactly where they are. Tramping through the dry wash is a small herd of wild burros. These rugged little donkeys are not native to the Mojave. They are the tough, stubborn descendants of pack animals left behind by miners over a century ago. They have completely adapted to this brutal environment. When the surface water dries up entirely, the burros do not panic. They just use their heavy hooves to dig deep into the dry riverbeds, creating their own temporary wells to reach the groundwater hidden below. This excavation work actually saves lives. By digging these deep holes, the burros inadvertently create small, vital water sources for dozens of other species. Small birds, rodents, and lizards flock to these muddy pits the moment the burros step away. It is a strange, unintended alliance in a place where cooperation is incredibly rare. But drawing a crowd in the desert always comes with a very steep price. A coyote watches the waterhole from a rocky ridge. He is panting, desperate for a drink, but he refuses to approach. He knows the rules of the oasis. Water draws prey, but water also draws the apex killers. The scent of damp earth and congregating animals is a dinner bell for the heavyweights. The coyote shifts nervously, his eyes scanning the boulders stacked above the spring. He is looking for the mountain lion. Pumas know that staking out a waterhole is much easier than chasing down prey across the broken valleys. A thirsty animal is a distracted animal. The big cat will wedge itself between the rocks, perfectly camouflaged in the moonlight, and just wait. When a thirsty mule deer or a careless bighorn sheep finally drops its head to drink, the cat launches. The oasis is the greatest paradox of the Mojave. It is the one place that gives life, but it is also the easiest place to lose it. For months, sometimes even years, the Mojave sky offers absolutely nothing but a blinding, unforgiving blue. But late in the summer, the atmospheric pressure shifts. Massive, dark monsoon clouds begin to stack up over the mountains, bruising the sky in shades of deep purple and black. The smell of ozone and wet dust fills the air, and then the sky rips open. When it rains in the Mojave, it does not drizzle, it dumps. Millions of gallons of water crash onto the sun-baked, rock-hard ground. The earth cannot absorb it fast enough. Within minutes, dry washes turn into raging, muddy rivers carrying boulders, uprooted cactus, and anything else unlucky enough to be in the way. It is a violent, destructive flash flood. But for one bizarre resident, this chaos is the ultimate wake-up call. Deep underground, encased in a hardened cocoon of its own dead skin, the couch's spade-foot toad hears the low-frequency rumble of the thunder. It has been buried alive for 10 straight months, waiting for this exact moment. The water seeps into the soil, dissolving the cocoon. The toad violently digs its way to the surface, emerging into a flooded world. They have practically zero time. They must find a temporary puddle, mate, and lay their eggs before the desert dries out completely. The temporary pools are a frenzy of frantic mating and rapid growth. The tadpoles must hatch and turn into fully formed toads in less than 2 weeks, a biological speed run driven entirely by the evaporating water. But the sudden bloom of life brings out the specialized hunters. Patrolling the damp soil is the tarantula hawk, a massive wasp with metallic blue-black armor and rust-colored wings. This wasp is hunting for tarantulas forced out of their flooded burrows. When she finds one, a brutal gladiatorial match begins. The wasp has one of the most painful stings in the insect kingdom. She parries the spider's fangs, looking for an opening, and drives her stinger straight into its nerve center. The venom does not kill the tarantula, it permanently paralyzes it. The wasp drags the living, helpless spider back to a dry burrow, lays a single egg on its abdomen, and seals the door. The rain brings life to the desert, but it also brings incredibly creative forms of death. The desert is not kind to weakness. A simple sprained ankle, a missed meal, or a slight miscalculation in finding shade can turn a healthy animal into a carcass in just a matter of hours. The summer heat accelerates everything, turning the Mojave into an open-air crematorium. But nothing goes to waste out here. Death is simply the beginning of a highly efficient cleanup operation. High up in the thermal columns, a turkey vulture circles lazily. To most, these birds are ugly and repulsive, with their bald red heads and dark, ragged feathers. But to the ecosystem, they are the absolute ultimate sanitation workers. The vulture has a sense of smell so refined it can detect the gases of decaying meat from miles away, picking up the scent of death long before the animal is even visible on the ground. The turkey vulture has an ironclad stomach. Its stomach acid is incredibly corrosive, allowing it to eat rotting meat infected with anthrax, botulism, and cholera without getting sick at all. By consuming these diseased carcasses, the vultures are literally scrubbing the desert clean of lethal pathogens. They drop down to the carcass of a fallen jackrabbit, their bald heads allowing them to plunge deep into the messy meat without getting bacteria stuck in their feathers. But they are not the only ones at the dinner table. Waiting patiently at the edges are the desert darkling beetles. These black, heavily armored insects swarm the remaining bones and dried connective tissue. They are nature's microscavengers, breaking down the tough biological material that even the vultures leave behind. As night falls, the larger scavengers arrive. A coyote catches the scent on the cooling wind. He does not care that the meat is tough or spoiled. In the Mojave, a free meal is a miracle. He fiercely defends the scraps from other coyotes, cracking the remaining bones with his powerful jaws to get at the fatty, calorie-rich marrow inside. By the time the sun rises again the next morning, the carcass is entirely gone, just a faint stain on the sand. The desert takes back absolutely everything. If you want to survive the Mojave daylight, you have 2 choices. You either dig a hole, or you become completely invisible. The art of camouflage here goes far beyond just matching the color of the dirt. It is about erasing your shadow, hiding your thermal signature, and blending into an environment that offers virtually no cover. Take a close look at the sandy gravel near a harvester ant mound. It looks empty, but a desert horned lizard is sitting right in plain sight. Its body is flat, shaped exactly like a jagged rock, covered in spikes that completely break up its outline. Its colors perfectly mimic the specific shade of sand it lives on. It sits absolutely motionless, using its sticky tongue to casually pick off ants one by one as they march past. But its camouflage is not foolproof. A hungry roadrunner spots the lizard and charges. The horned lizard does not run. It knows it is too slow. Instead, it relies on one of the most bizarre defense mechanisms on Earth. It restricts the blood flow from its head, increasing the pressure in its eyes until tiny capillaries burst. Suddenly, the lizard shoots a stream of foul-tasting, toxic blood directly from its eyes, hitting the roadrunner right in the face. The bird squawks in disgust, drops the lizard, and frantically wipes its beak in the dirt. Meanwhile, in the softer dunes, another master of disguise is waiting. The sidewinder rattlesnake. Moving across loose, hot sand is incredibly difficult, so this snake has evolved a unique way of throwing its body in lateral loops, keeping most of its skin off the burning ground. When it finds a good ambush spot, it shimmies its body down until it is entirely buried, leaving only its eyes and heat-sensing pits exposed above the sand. It uses small, horn-like scales above its eyes to keep the sand out of its vision, like built-in sun visors. The sidewinder lies there, completely undetectable, acting as a living landmine. It does not twitch. It barely breathes. A small pocket mouse scurries over the dune, totally unaware that the ground beneath it is alive. In a blur of motion, the sand erupts. The strike is flawless. In the Mojave, the things you cannot see are almost always the things that kill you. If you wander through the Mojave, you will inevitably come across the jumping cholla. From a distance, this cactus actually looks soft. It glows in the sunlight with a fuzzy, almost inviting halo. But make no mistake, that plant is pure evil. The cholla is covered in dense, microscopic barbs that hook into flesh and simply refuse to let go. Just brushing past it can leave you with a joint full of agonizing spines. You would think every animal in its right mind would give this plant a very wide berth. But in a landscape where shade and protection are practically non-existent, a few brilliant rebels have turned this botanical torture device into a high-security fortress. Listen closely, and you might hear the harsh, raspy call of the cactus wren. It is the largest wren in the United States, and it intentionally builds its nest deep inside the most densely packed cholla branches it can find. The wren navigates the lethal needles with absolute precision. It uses the cactus as a natural barbed wire fence to keep hungry snakes and predatory birds away from its eggs. But the bird is not the only one utilizing this extreme real estate. Down at the base of the plant, there is an absolute masterpiece of defensive engineering. It looks like a massive, chaotic pile of dead sticks, cow dung, and cactus joints. This is the stronghold of the desert wood rat, also known as the pack rat. This rodent actively collects fallen pieces of cholla cactus and piles them around the entrances of its burrow. It is a literal wall of pain. The wood rat sits safely inside its cool subterranean den, munching on tough vegetation while keeping a sharp ear out for predators. A bobcat silently stalks through the brush, its tufted ears twitching. It smells the rat. The cat moves with fluid grace, trying to find an angle to dig out the rodent. But the moment it swipes a paw at the debris pile, it hits the cholla needles. The bobcat recoils, shaking its paw in intense irritation. Out here, brute force rarely wins against clever engineering. The cat realizes the meal is just not worth the pain and moves on, leaving the wood rat safe and sound in its prickly castle. Far away from the rocky slopes, the Mojave opens up into sweeping seas of soft sand dunes. Under the midday sun, these dunes are totally sterile, shifting quietly in the dry wind. But when midnight rolls around and the sand rapidly cools, a tiny, silent phantom emerges from the darkness. It is the kit fox. Weighing barely 5 pounds, the kit fox is the smallest wild canine in North America. But it is perfectly designed for this brutal zip code. Look at the size of those ears. They are absolutely massive compared to its head. Those ears serve a dual purpose. First, they radiate body heat away from the fox, acting like built-in radiators. Second, they act as highly sensitive parabolic microphones. The kit fox does not just trot blindly through the dark. It stops, tilting its head, listening to the sand itself. The heavy fur on the bottoms of its paws acts like snowshoes, keeping it from sinking while completely muffling its footsteps. It is stalking a kangaroo rat that is busy gathering seeds nearby. The fox is so quiet that even the rat's highly sensitive hearing barely registers the incoming danger. The strike is a blur of sandy fur. The fox leaps, pinning the rat before it can deploy its famous, evasive jumps. It is a quick, silent kill. The kit fox eats the entire rat, bones, fur, and all. And just like the rat it just consumed, This little fox gets virtually all the hydration it needs strictly from the moisture inside its prey. It can go months, sometimes its entire life, without lapping at a pool of water. But rodents are not the only items on the menu. If times are exceptionally tough, the kit fox will hunt desert scorpions. It carefully pins the arachnid down and aggressively bites off the venomous stinger before eating the rest of the body. In the deep dunes of the Mojave, you cannot afford to be a picky eater. You take whatever calories the sand offers, or you do not survive to see the dawn. Survival in the Mojave is an endless biological arms race. Predators evolve a lethal weapon, and prey immediately gets to work developing a countermeasure. It is a slow, ruthless game of chess that plays out over millions of years. And nowhere is this rivalry more intense than in the dusty, scrub-covered lowlands. The California ground squirrel is out foraging in the morning sun. It looks like an easy, chubby target for the Mojave green rattlesnake, slowly slithering out of a nearby crevice. The snake is packing that terrifying neurotoxic venom we talked about earlier. It coils up, ready to deliver a fatal dose. But the squirrel does not run. It turns around, faces the deadly reptile, and starts aggressively kicking dirt right into the snake's face. But that is not even the craziest part. The squirrel begins rapidly pumping warm blood into its large, bushy tail, waving it back and forth like a flag. To the snake's infrared heat-sensing pits, the squirrel's tail suddenly looks like a massive, glowing fireball. It completely confuses the snake's targeting system, making the squirrel look twice as big and far too dangerous to strike. The frustrated rattlesnake actually backs down and slithers away. But the rattlesnake's bad day is just beginning. As it retreats under a mesquite bush, it crosses paths with a sleek, beautifully banded reptile, the California king snake. The king snake does not have venom. It does not have heat-sensing pits. What it does have is an absolute immunity to rattlesnake venom and a massive appetite for other snakes. The rattlesnake panics. It strikes, sinking its fangs deep into the king snake's neck, pumping in the neurotoxin. The king snake literally does not care. The venom simply bounces off its specialized proteins. The king snake grabs the rattler by the jaw, coils its powerful muscular body around the viper, and begins to squeeze. It constricts until the rattlesnake suffocates, and then swallows the deadliest snake in the desert whole. Out here, even the apex killers have nightmares. The Mojave is definitely not a quiet place if you know where to listen. In the early morning, the dry washes echo with a distinct rhythmic clucking. A small flock of Gambel's quail is on the move. These birds look almost comical, with a prominent tear-shaped black feather bouncing right on top of their heads like a tiny antenna. You will rarely see these birds fly. Flying requires a massive burst of energy and generates way too much body heat. In this environment, overheating is just as deadly as a predator. So, the quail choose to walk, or rather, they run. They scurry in a highly organized, tight-knit group, picking at seeds, small insects, and tiny green shoots that sprouted from a rare rainstorm. But moving in a large group makes a lot of noise, and it draws very sharp eyes. Hiding in the dense branches of a palo verde tree is a Cooper's hawk. This hawk is a specialized avian assassin. It does not soar high in the sky like an eagle. It prefers to hunt in the thickest, most tangled brush, using its short, rounded wings and long tail to maneuver through the thorny branches like a fighter jet in a canyon. The hawk drops from the branch, staying low to the ground to completely mask its approach. It locks onto a straggling quail. Suddenly, the flock explodes in absolute panic. The quails scatter in 50 different directions, finally using their wings in a frantic, noisy burst of flight to confuse the predator. The air fills with dust and feathers. The hawk twists midair, its talons extended, but the brush is too thick. It crashes through a dry bush, missing its target by a fraction of an inch. The quail hit the ground running and immediately vanish into the scrub, but they cannot relax. A bobcat was watching the entire commotion from a nearby ridge. The desert is a gauntlet. You dodge the death from above, only to run straight into the jaws waiting in the shadows. For a bird that lives its life on the ground, every single day is a marathon just to survive until sunset. Heat and thirst are not the only elemental forces trying to wipe out life in the Mojave. Sometimes the threat does not come from the sun, but from the air itself. The horizon begins to blur. A massive, towering wall of brown dust is rolling across the desert floor, swallowing the mountains whole. It is a haboob, a violent, suffocating dust storm driven by sudden pressure drops and fierce winds. Down on the ground, the early warning system is already going off. Thousands of desert harvester ants are working at double speed. These ants are the farmers of the desert, aggressively clearing wide circular patches around their nests to keep predators away while they drag seeds underground. But right now, the air pressure is dropping rapidly, and they know what is coming. They frantically retreat into their tunnels, dragging the last few seeds down before sealing the entrance tight with pebbles and dirt. The storm hits with the force of a freight train. The wind howls at 60 miles an hour, carrying millions of tons of abrasive sand. The sky turns completely black. It is hard to breathe, and the flying gravel hits like buckshot. A coyote caught out in the open lowers his head, squinting his eyes to narrow slits. He abandons his hunt and desperately forces his way into a shallow rock crevice, curling his tail over his nose to act as a dust filter. While the mammals suffer, some reptiles take a totally different approach. A desert iguana was caught too far from its burrow. Instead of fighting the wind, it simply flattens its body against the base of a creosote bush and closes its eyes. These lizards have specialized nasal valves that shut completely, keeping the dust out of their lungs. They just ride it out, letting the sand bury them slightly. Hours later, the wind finally breaks. The dust settles, leaving a thick, powdery layer of silence over everything. The landscape looks completely different. Tracks are erased, scents are blown away, and the dunes have entirely shifted shape. The coyote shakes the sand from his coat and steps back out into a newly reshaped world. The storm hit the reset button on the desert floor. The hunt has to start all over again from absolute zero. Imagine wandering through a sun-blasted wasteland of cracked mud and blinding white salt flats. The heat waves distort the horizon, making the mountains look like they are melting into the sky. You are miles away from anywhere, completely surrounded by death. But then, out of nowhere, you hear the impossible sound of moving water. Hidden deep within the most unforgiving corners of the Mojave are ancient crystal-clear springs. These isolated pockets of water have been bubbling up from deep underground aquifers since the end of the last ice age. These springs are not just pretty watering holes. They are islands of life entirely cut off from the rest of the world, and they hold some of the rarest creatures on the entire planet. Look closely into the shallow, warm pools, and you will see a flash of brilliant metallic blue. This is the Mojave desert pupfish. They are tiny, barely an inch long, and they live in water that can easily reach 93 degrees. To put that in perspective, that water would kill almost any other fish on Earth within minutes. The pupfish are trapped here. They cannot migrate, and they cannot leave the spring. For over 10,000 years, they have been evolving in these tiny, isolated puddles. They survive wild temperature swings and incredibly high salt concentrations. But their entire existence hangs by an invisible thread. If the water level drops just a few inches due to a dry winter or underground pumping, their shallow breeding shelves are exposed to the deadly sun. The entire species can be pushed to the absolute brink of extinction over a single weekend. But for the creatures above the water, these springs are a literal lifesaver. As autumn rolls in, the skies above the Mojave become an invisible highway. Millions of migratory birds are pushing south, flying thousands of miles from Canada to Mexico. Crossing the Mojave is the most dangerous leg of their journey. They are running entirely on empty, burning through their body fat at a terrifying rate. When a flock of exhausted warblers or sandpipers spots the green vegetation ringing a desert spring, they drop from the sky like stones. It is a desperate scramble to drink, bathe, and gorge on the millions of dragonflies and midges buzzing over the water. But predators know exactly where these rest stops are. Falcons and hawks sit patiently in the surrounding mesquite trees, waiting for the exhausted travelers to drop their guard. An oasis is a sanctuary, but it is heavily taxed by the sharp talons waiting in the branches. When the brutal Mojave sun goes down, a very strange sound occasionally drifts across the scrub brush. It is high-pitched, drawn out, and sounds exactly like a miniature wolf howling at the silver moon. But the creature making this noise does not weigh 100 pounds, and it does not run in a pack. It is a rodent that fits perfectly in the palm of your hand. Meet the southern grasshopper mouse. Do not let the cute, fuzzy exterior fool you. This mouse is an absolute psychopath of the desert floor. While other rodents are busy hiding in terror, nibbling on dry seeds and trying not to get eaten, the grasshopper mouse is an active, aggressive carnivore. It patrols the sandy dunes looking for a fight. Its diet consists of insects, lizards, and even other larger mice. But its absolute favorite meal is something that terrifies almost everything else in the desert. The mouse catches the scent of a giant desert hairy scorpion. We are talking about a heavily armored arachnid packing a stinger that can cause immense, throbbing pain. The mouse does not back down. It charges. The fight is incredibly fast and completely vicious. The scorpion snaps its massive claws, trying to crush the tiny mammal, and whips its tail over its head to deliver a lethal sting. The mouse gets stung, once, twice, right in the face. For any other creature this size, that venom would cause immediate paralysis and death. But the grasshopper mouse has a biological cheat code. Through millions of years of evolution, its nervous system has completely rewired the way it processes the scorpion's toxin. Instead of triggering pain receptors, the venom binds to them and blocks the pain signals entirely. The scorpion's ultimate weapon literally acts as a mild painkiller for the mouse. Shrugging off the stings as if they were mosquito bites, the mouse bites down hard, severing the scorpion's tail. With the primary weapon neutralized, the mouse casually eats the rest of the armored giant while it is still twitching. After a massive meal like that, the mouse climbs onto a nearby rock, stands up on its hind legs, and throws its head back to unleash that high-pitched howl. It is claiming its territory. In the Mojave, the most terrifying monsters are not always the biggest ones. There is a rare phenomenon in the Mojave that flips the entire script of death and starvation. It only happens once every 10 or 15 years, and the conditions have to be absolutely perfect. It requires heavy, sustained winter rains soaking into the soil, followed by gentle, warming spring temperatures. When this precise chemical lock is opened, the desert floor erupts into a superbloom. Overnight, the brown, cracked earth vanishes. Millions of dormant seeds that have been waiting patiently in the dust for a decade suddenly explode into life. The valleys are painted in blinding shades of gold, deep violet, and vibrant orange. Fields of desert sunflowers, brittlebush, and lupin stretch for dozens of miles. The air, usually dry and dusty, becomes incredibly thick with sweet pollen. It is a frantic, massive celebration of life. This explosion of flowers triggers a massive migration. Costa's hummingbirds dart violently between the blooms, their iridescent purple throats flashing like jewels in the sun. They are flying on a razor's edge, burning calories so fast that they will literally starve to death if they stop feeding for a few hours. Huge swarms of desert bees and brightly colored butterflies join the frenzy. Everyone is rushing to gather nectar and reproduce before the brutal summer heat returns to burn the flowers away. But all this brilliant color creates the perfect cover for a very specific type of killer. Sitting completely motionless on the bright yellow petals of a sunflower is the green lynx spider. This spider does not build a web. It does not chase its prey. It relies on flawless, vibrant camouflage to blend perfectly with the thick green stems and bright leaves of the blooming plants. The spider waits with endless patience. A massive carpenter bee, drunk on nectar, buzzes lazily over the flower and lands right next to the hidden hunter. The spider launches itself in a fraction of a second, wrapping its long, spiky legs around the bee and sinking its fangs into the insect's neck. The venom works instantly. Even in the middle of a massive, beautiful botanical miracle, the desert is still a battlefield. The bloom gives life, but it also provides a very beautiful place to die. We often think of wild animals in incredibly simple terms. Predators hunt alone or in strict packs, and they never tolerate competition. But the Mojave has a way of forcing enemies to rethink the rules entirely. If you sit quietly on a rocky ridge at dawn, you might witness one of the strangest partnerships in the natural world. A coyote is trotting along the edge of a dry wash. He is lean, hungry, and heavily focused on a large colony of California ground squirrels. The problem is that ground squirrels are incredibly smart and very fast. They live in massive underground tunnel systems with dozens of escape routes. If the coyote charges, the squirrels just dive into their holes. The coyote cannot dig fast enough to catch them. He needs some very specific help. Enter the American badger. This animal looks like a heavily armored footstool with razor-sharp claws. Badgers are essentially living backhoes. They can dig through rock-hard desert soil faster than almost any other animal on the continent. But badgers have terrible eyesight, and they are incredibly slow runners. If a squirrel bolts out of a tunnel onto the open dirt, the badger has absolutely no chance of catching it. So, the coyote and the badger team up. It is not friendship. It is a highly calculated business transaction. The coyote tracks the squirrel to a specific hole and stands guard. The badger waddles over and starts ripping the earth apart, sending dirt flying in massive chunks. The squirrel trapped inside the tunnel has a terrible choice to make. It can stay inside and be crushed by the terrible claws of the badger, or it can bolt out the back door. The squirrel panics and shoots out of a hidden exit hole right into the open. But the coyote is already waiting. In 3 massive strides, the coyote snaps up the fleeing rodent. The hunt is over. Sometimes the badger catches the squirrel underground, and sometimes the coyote gets it on the surface. They do not share the meal. Whoever makes the kill eats it all. But they tolerate each other because, by hunting together, their overall success rate skyrockets. It is a perfect, ruthless syndicate born strictly out of necessity. When people hear the word Mojave, they instantly think of boiling heat and melting boots. But this desert is actually categorized as a high-elevation, cold desert, and when the calendar flips to December, the environment pulls a massive, lethal trick. The temperatures plummet. The same ground that burned at over 140 degrees in July is now coated in a thick, creeping layer of silver frost. Sometimes the moisture from the Pacific crashes into the freezing air, and the impossible happens. It snows. The towering Joshua trees, built to endure absolute fire, are suddenly buried under heavy, wet snow. The desert becomes entirely silent. This sudden, violent drop in temperature is incredibly dangerous for animals that have spent the last 6 months shedding their fur to stay cool. A black-tailed jackrabbit is huddled under a snow-covered sagebrush. Those massive ears, which were perfectly designed to radiate body heat during the summer, are now a huge liability. They are freezing cold, pulling precious heat away from its core. The rabbit tucks its ears flat against its back and fluffs up its fur, trying to trap whatever warmth it can generate. It has to burn a massive amount of calories just to keep its heart beating through the freezing night. And calories are exactly what a hungry bobcat is looking for. The bobcat has a distinct advantage right now. Its thick winter coat keeps it incredibly warm, and its large, furry paws act like natural snowshoes, allowing it to move silently across the frozen crust. The rabbit cannot hear the cat coming because the snow absorbs all the sound. The cat strikes, pinning the freezing rabbit against the hard ground. It is a brutal reality check. The Mojave does not just test your ability to endure the fire, it tests your ability to survive the ice. High above, a raven sits shivering on a dead branch watching the kill. It puffs its black feathers out, waiting for the cat to leave some frozen scraps behind. Whether it is 120 degrees or freezing solid, the relentless machine of the desert never stops grinding. If you step away from the sandy valleys and climb up into the jagged volcanic rock piles of the Mojave, you will notice something strange. These dark rocks absorb the sun like a sponge, heating up to temperatures that would literally cook a raw steak. But for one very specific resident, this oven is an absolute paradise. Meet the chuckwalla. It is the second largest lizard in the United States, and it looks like a miniature, slightly overweight dinosaur. Chuckwallas are strictly vegetarians. They spend their early mornings lazily munching on yellow brittlebush flowers and tough creosote leaves. But they are completely cold-blooded, which means they need the sun to digest that heavy plant matter. So by midday, you will see these massive, dark-skinned lizards sprawled out perfectly flat on the scorching black rocks, soaking up the lethal heat as if they were lounging by a pool. But sitting out in the open on a high rock makes you a very obvious target. High above, riding the thermal currents, a red-tailed hawk is scanning the boulder fields. The hawk's vision is terrifyingly sharp. It spots the chuckwalla and immediately folds its wings, dropping into a steep, high-speed dive. The lizard catches the shadow moving across the rocks out of the corner of its eye. It does not try to outrun the hawk across the open ground. That would be suicide. Instead, the chuckwalla scrambles directly into a tight, narrow crack in the volcanic rock. The hawk pulls up at the last second, landing aggressively on the boulder and thrusting its sharp talons into the crevice. But the chuckwalla has deployed a brilliant defense mechanism. It takes a massive breath of air, filling its lungs to absolute maximum capacity, and literally inflates its entire body like a balloon. The lizard wedges itself so tightly against the rough walls of the rock that it becomes physically impossible to pull out. A passing coyote might catch the scent and try to dig the lizard out with its teeth, but it is totally useless. The chuckwalla just sits there, puffed up and perfectly safe, while the frustrated predators eventually give up and wander away to find an easier meal. In a desert this brutal, sometimes survival simply means knowing exactly how to hold your ground. We have talked a lot about the deadly predators that roam the Mojave at night, but there is one creature that even the coyotes and the bobcats prefer to avoid entirely. It does not have fur, it does not have scales, and it certainly does not have any fear. Hidden deep under the loose rocks during the day is the giant desert centipede. This thing is the absolute stuff of nightmares. Stretching up to 8 inches long, it has an armored, segmented body in warning colors of dark orange and black, and it has legs. Dozens of highly sensitive legs that allow it to move across the uneven desert floor with terrifying, fluid speed. But the real horror show is up front. This centipede is equipped with a pair of modified legs near its head called forcipules. They are essentially massive, hollow fangs hooked directly to powerful venom glands. When the centipede hunts, it is not looking for small insects. It is incredibly aggressive and highly ambitious. It patrols the base of the Joshua trees, sensing the vibrations of anything foolish enough to move. A desert tarantula is out looking for a mate. The centipede does not hesitate. It rushes the massive spider, wrapping its segmented body entirely around the tarantula to pin its legs down. The tarantula frantically tries to bite, but the centipede's armor is just too thick. The centipede drives its venomous pincers straight into the spider's main nerve bundle. The neurotoxin acts like a chemical sledgehammer, shutting down the tarantula's nervous system almost instantly. The centipede just starts eating the spider right there in the dirt. But the terror does not stop at the ground level. These giant centipedes have been documented climbing the rough bark of desert shrubs and waiting near small caves to snatch low-flying bats right out of the air. They are relentless, highly toxic, and always hungry. If there is a true monster lurking in the dark corners of the Mojave, this multi-legged assassin is definitely it. Down in the vast, flat basins of the Mojave, where the wind wipes the ground smooth and the horizon stretches for miles, you need a totally different strategy to stay alive. There are no rocks to hide under here. There are no dense bushes to provide cover. If you are caught out in the open, your only option is pure, unadulterated speed. And nobody on the North American continent does speed better than the pronghorn. Often mistakenly called an antelope, the pronghorn is actually a unique survivor from a completely different era. These animals are built like biological race cars. They have massively enlarged windpipes, enormous lungs, and a heart twice the size of a comparable animal. They can spot movement from over 3 miles away. When a pronghorn decides to run, it does not just sprint, it glides over the sagebrush at a staggering 60 miles an hour. But here is the crazy part. There is absolutely nothing in the modern Mojave Desert that is fast enough to catch them. Coyotes top out at about 40 miles an hour. So why did the pronghorn evolve to run so ridiculously fast? Because 10,000 years ago, they were running for their lives from the American cheetah. The predators died out during the last ice age, but the pronghorn kept its incredible speed. It is a living ghost, running from a killer that no longer exists. But that does not mean they are completely invincible today. A pack of coyotes knows they cannot outrun a healthy adult pronghorn. So, they change the game entirely. They use endurance and teamwork. The coyotes will fan out across a wide valley, taking turns chasing a specific pronghorn, slowly forcing it to run in massive circles. They are trying to exhaust the animal, waiting for it to overheat in the brutal desert sun. And the coyotes are not the only threat. Golden eagles will often target the young pronghorn fawns that cannot yet hit those top speeds. The adults have to be violently protective, using their sharp, hooked horns to fend off the massive birds of prey. The pronghorn is a beautiful, out-of-place speedster trapped in a slow, grinding wasteland. They survive by always moving, forever outrunning the shadows of the past and the predators of the present. Survival out here is heavily dictated by what you can tolerate. The Mojave is packed with plants that have evolved extreme chemical defenses just to keep from being eaten. The creosote bush, which covers millions of acres, is loaded with toxic resins that smell exactly like rain but taste like industrial poison. Almost nothing can digest it. But nature hates a vacuum, and a few specialists have cracked the chemical code. Look up into the thorny branches of a honey mesquite tree, and you will likely see huge, tangled clumps of green desert mistletoe. It is a parasitic plant that literally sucks the water right out of the host tree. Its small red berries are highly toxic to most animals, but a sleek, jet-black bird with bright red eyes flies right into the clump. This is the phainopepla, or the silky flycatcher. This bird has built its entire life around this toxic parasite. Its digestive tract is specially modified to strip the nutritious pulp from the poisonous mistletoe berries while passing the sticky seeds completely unharmed. The bird gets a massive amount of water and sugar from a food source that nobody else can touch. And in return, when the bird flies to a new tree and drops its waste, it plants a brand new mistletoe seed directly on a fresh branch. It is a perfect, isolated loop of survival. Down on the ground, the desert wood rat has developed its own toxic tolerance. Remember the pack rat that builds its nest out of painful cactus spines? Well, it also regularly eats the incredibly toxic leaves of the creosote bush. The wood rat's liver has evolved to process the toxic resins that would completely destroy the kidneys of any other rodent. But this specialized diet comes with a heavy risk. A gopher snake, a powerful constrictor that hunts exclusively in the dark scrub, has picked up the wood rat's scent. The snake slowly weaves its way through the toxic creosote branches, totally unfazed by the chemical warfare of the plants. It slips directly into the wood rat's complex burrow. The rat might have conquered the most poisonous plants in the desert, but it still cannot engineer a defense against a silent killer slipping through the front door. The Mojave is a masterclass in endurance, but it is completely merciless to the young and the inexperienced. We started our journey talking about the ancient desert tortoise, those walking stones that can live for over 80 years. But reaching that old age is practically a statistical impossibility. The first 5 years of a desert tortoise's life are an absolute gauntlet of death. When a baby tortoise hatches from its egg buried in the warm sand, it is entirely on its own. It is barely the size of a silver dollar, and its shell is soft and pliable, offering exactly zero protection. Out here, a soft shell just means an easy snack. The baby tortoise must immediately dig a small burrow or find a deep rock crevice to hide from the sun and the hungry eyes watching from above. The biggest threat does not come from coyotes or snakes. It comes from the ravens. We mentioned earlier how smart these black birds are. Over the decades, ravens have learned to aggressively patrol the desert floor, specifically looking for baby tortoises. A raven will spot a hatchling, swoop down, and simply use its heavy, sharp beak to punch right through the baby's soft shell. It is efficient, brutal, and totally one-sided. A baby tortoise has only about a 2% chance of making it to adulthood. They survive by sheer luck, hiding deep in the shadows, moving only during the coolest, darkest hours, and avoiding the attention of literally everything else in the ecosystem. If they can somehow avoid the ravens, dodge the crushing jaws of coyotes, and outlast the blistering droughts for 10 long years, their shells finally harden into that famous, impenetrable armor. Once that armor is solid, they become the untouchable elders of the desert. They join the ranks of the true survivors. The Mojave does not care how smart you are, how fast you run, or how toxic you are. It only respects pure, stubborn persistence. Every single creature we have seen out here is a biological marvel, perfectly engineered for a world that actively wants them dead. The Mojave Desert is not a barren wasteland. It is a highly specialized arena. From the silent pumas stalking behind granite peaks, to the deadly scorpions glowing in the dark, to the tiny pupfish swimming in boiling ancient springs, it is a place of extreme violence and breathtaking, unexpected beauty. Life here does not just exist, it fiercely insists upon itself. Every drop of water is fought over. Every patch of shade is a contested territory. The rules are carved in stone and enforced by the sun. To survive the Mojave is to master the impossible. It is a scorched kingdom, and those who call it home are nothing short of absolute legends.